How can you fix a boss that players think is too slow? Just make the boss faster, you say? You fool! Actually, sometimes yes. But bosses don't all have to be zippy, hyper-twitch caffeine bombs to be good. Shadow of the Colossus designed almost all of its bosses to be very slow, and it's a classic. Some bosses are meant to be slow, but they do have to fight the feeling of slowness. It's not as easy as it sounds though. That feeling can be caused by lots of things, and subtle variations on what the problem is can lead to completely different ways to fix it. For a change of pace, let's talk about how to fix a slow boss. Fast track your finances with today's sponsor, Rocket Money. This is that app that lets you save on sneaky subscriptions. I found out I was still paying $5 a month for a fitness app subscription I switched off of last year. That could have paid for like 20 games on the Steam sale right there. Or like an hour of rent. I think that math checks out. Rocket Money also helps you set a customized budget in seconds. The app can help you see exactly where your money is going, identifying top spending categories, and can help you be better informed about your personal finances. Rocket Money has helped customers save up to $740 a year when you use all of the app's premium features, and has saved customers $500 million and counting in canceled subscriptions. It's the new year, and a lot of people set financial resolutions around now. Rocket Money can help. Take control of your finances today. Go to rocketmoney.com/designdoc or click the link in the description to get started for free. Each slow boss is slow in its own way, but even if the specifics are a little different from boss to boss, if you look at enough of them, you might be able to spot a few themes as to why they feel slow. Let's start with one of my favorites, Kingdom Hearts 1. Now, this is gonna sound too dumb to ask, but does your boss feel too slow because it literally isn't doing anything? Like this guy, the Rock Titan. The Rock Titan is the grand finale of the Hades Cup, a 50-match gauntlet arena that you unlock as part of the endgame content. To get here, you've got to fight through 49 other arena challenges, full of optional bosses and difficult enemy mobs. And it all leads to this big anticlimax. You might expect him to be slow, but not this slow. Look at him. He takes a literal minute and a half to walk across the arena. You do not. It's not like he's got attack range to cover for that either. He has a stomp and a slightly larger hand stomp. I'm not kidding, that's it. He doesn't even throw rocks. The attack plan is to go all in on his legs until he topples over, then climb up and beat down his two heads. The heads flail around a little, but that's nothing to worry about. If you do get hit, it's a chunk of damage, but there's a lot of time between attacks to cast Cure and get back to it. Conceptually, the Rock Titan should be a totally reasonable, challenging fight. A big, powerful looking boss with area of effect moves and plenty of HP. Massive characters are supposed to convey tons of strength and health, and the common balancing nerf those characters get is to reduce attack and movement speed. But you can turn that knob too far down, and make it almost impossible for the boss to get a good hit in. Making the final arena challenge in this game a boss with this severe of a weakness is a bizarre choice. One of the biggest letdowns of an optional boss you'll find anywhere. So, one game from 20-some years ago has one weird, too slow boss that can't move fast enough to attack you. Surely no modern game would do that, right? Well, you can make the same problem with a different recipe. The Hinox from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is not as helpless, but not much better. They're almost always found sleeping, so they're easy to sneak up to and get in position. It'll go through a very slow standing animation, and you can wail on it the whole time. Once they're up and active, they're much tougher to deal with. These guys become a real challenge for new players who hesitate. And that's really who this boss is perfect for. New players, who will be awestruck when they spot one and give the Hinox a fighting chance. Once a Hinox gets moving, it has a bunch of fun little attacks and behaviors that make it memorable. It's just maybe a little too easy to figure out how to blitz it down before it gets to any of the fun parts. the encounter is solved. The extreme slowness creates too big of an Achilles heel, one that I can blast with this hammer. So if you're making a boss, keep an eye out for ones that seem easy to blitz down while taking no damage. And if you spot that happening in playtesting, look for ways to cut down how often the boss poses no threat. The boss should not already be dead before it's active. Speed up animations, movement, or attacks, and that might be all you need to take these guys from exploitable to just right. Cool. Don't make your bosses literally too slow to be a threat. Got it. What other ways can a boss feel too slow? Let's see here. Here we go. Have you ever been trapped in a cutscene? Final Fantasy VII was the biggest, most expensive, most cinematic game that had ever been made. In 1997. The game's final fight against Sephiroth is a legendary grand finale, for plenty of reasons, but among them are its amazing fight animations. And the King of Kings is Supernova. Once Sephiroth casts it, get cozy and watch him bring the heavens down on your head. Quantum physics and orbital mechanics equations flash on screen as you see a comet come in from outside the galaxy. Watch as it blows up planets into polygons one by one, and explodes the sun, engulfing you and your party. For like a couple thousand damage. The animation's pretty sweet even now, honestly. We're grading on a curve, but for 1997, this was unbelievable. The attack is 2 minutes long and it's good as hell. Once. It's not a unique attack. Sephiroth's happy to blow up another identical solar system if you take too long to kill him, and you'll get to watch the whole thing happen all over again. There's nothing for you to do during the cutscene. No blocking, nothing to prepare, and it's not skippable. If you lose the fight, it's back to the start, and he'll for sure cast it again next time. The North American release of the game is the only one with this full animation. The Japanese one's much shorter. More of a static image than a tiny movie. Not nearly as bombastic. I did not have a great time finishing this game back in the day, just for the amount of time spent on repeating this cutscene. Jason Greenberg had it worse though. As development was wrapping on the PC port of FF7, he was drafted into helping the team test the game as much as possible. In a PC Gamer retrospective, he talked about a bug that hard crashed the game during that cutscene. His team had to spend a ton of time testing fixes on it. Quote, "I've probably spent at least a full 24 hours playing that one battle." It's still a pretty cool attack though. Supernova is an extreme case. Literally, it got a Guinness World Record for how extreme it is. But the game's summon animation lengths were a common complaint, even back then. For the next few games, Square tried a few different fixes. FF8 had the boost ability, where you could hammer square during the cutscene to raise the summon's attack power. You get all the spectacle of a long animation, and you sort of get something to keep you busy while you watch. Like Subway Surfer TikToks, but in the 90s. Not much of a fix. FF9 had shortened cutscenes for its summons. After the first time you watch it, the sequence is much shorter next time. There's also a boost support ability that plays the longer animation every time, while increasing the attack's damage. But it's maybe not ideal to force players to watch the long animation if you want max attack power. FF10 had a toggle. You can choose long or short animations. This is, in my opinion, the nicest of the 4 cutscene systems, but there's still some core issues that aren't being addressed. If you're thinking about how to put cinematics into a boss fight, maybe stay away from using them for fight events that repeat. You can wow a player with high spectacle cutscenes without playing them during attacks. Shift it around. Maybe use one for a coup de grace at the end of a fight. Save the long animations as a capper, a phase shift, or an intro. All the hype, with none of the gameplay affecting downside. Okay, next up. Maybe a boss feels slow because of the way it telegraphs its moves. Instead of a helpless boss like in the first section, they could be giving players too long to prepare. Action bosses basically have to telegraph moves somehow. No telegraphing would mean instant attacks, and players would have to randomly guess to defend against them. Now, that could be a style of combat you're okay with, but if not, you have to give players some chance to react to an attack, even if it's as subtle as which eye blinks a split second before an attack gets thrown. But there's a very thin line between enough telegraphing and too much. Pikmin 3's can be a little too much. Boss fights in Pikmin can make you think of combat in an unusual way. The game's crowd mechanics aren't super common, but action combat can fall apart if a player has reacted to something and then has to wait around forever for the next decision point. Take Scornet Maestro. You've got this bird-bee hybrid thing that uses a harp to control drones and swoop them in on prey. It's sort of a rival fight if you think about it. You've got ants, Scornet's got bees. That sounds fun. Scornet is shielded by the drones until they're sent out to attack in 3 forms. A spiral that shoots bees at you, a big rectangle blockade where rows of bees will attack, and a surrounding circle. You're supposed to send out your wing Pikmin to attack the drones and create openings for your main squad to escape. Any of your Pikmin that get caught will be captured, and you have to use more wing Pikmin to get them back before the drones eat them. Not super tough, but it's a unique fight, and pretty fun to play through. But only in the original Wii U version. Pikmin 3 Deluxe, the Switch version of the game, tweaked a couple fundamentals that completely, literally, sidestep this boss's design. Pikmin in the original have different walking speeds. Leaf, Bud, and Flower Pikmin all get around differently, so corralling everyone takes some work. Pikmin 3 Deluxe unified everyone's following speed. No matter what type of Pikmin you have, they're all going to ball up right behind you. Essentially, your squad's hitbox is way smaller, but the game's enemies weren't also tweaked with that in mind. They're now less capable of picking off stragglers, now that there aren't as many stragglers. The Scornet Maestro fight makes the problem a lot more obvious. Now all you have to do is walk to the side, and you win. Your ball of ants is effectively way faster, so a player deciding to move away from an attack means that the whole group is out of danger very quickly. The timing on the attacks was tuned for the original game, meaning that the telegraphing window, where you know an attack is coming and have to act to dodge, is too wide now. You'll be clear of this machine gun formation and don't have to worry about the stragglers getting in place in time. No stragglers means no having to save the stragglers, and even fewer decisions you have to make. Not just that, but they made the whistle radius bigger in the re-release too. It's easier to get everyone back in the group if you lose a couple, which makes even fewer decisions for you to make. Once the boss is open, sending your squad on the attack means everyone jumps in there immediately, and obliterates the boss's HP much faster than in the original. The fight can easily be over even before the boss gets to all 3 attack forms. An amount of attack telegraphing that was appropriate under the old conditions feels like far too long now. Even though the fight is technically faster to play, it feels so much slower. When you're designing a boss, don't think only about how fast or slow a character appears. Think more in terms of the pacing of the player's decisions. FromSoft loves to apply different telegraphing behaviors to their bosses, in ways that make their slowest bosses feel as dramatic as any other action boss fight. Melee boss combat in Elden Ring relies on telegraphing moves, huge sweeping attacks that you have to defend against and roll through. It's hard to get very far at all in this series if you aren't willing to get up close and personal with the bosses you find, and you have to learn how to do that safely. The detailed timing you have to do when you react to boss attacks is one of the ways FromSoft creates the signature feel of Souls-like combat. There's nuance in every fight, and you have to learn how to appreciate and apply that nuance. In Elden Ring, one early boss is the gatekeeper for that concept, Margit, the Fell Omen. On this bridge, you will fight this very old, very deadly man. Margit has huge range with his staff and ghost blades, but he's not the fastest. Between attacks, he's quite slow, and when gearing up to strike, his wind-up animations are insanely long. But don't mistake that for the fight being easy. This is a skill check boss, and it's no guarantee you know how to pass the test. You can't blindly tumble your way through and expect to win. Margit is here to get you into the counter-attacking mood. If you treat him like a boss in other action games and start spamming dodge too early, you're going to burn through stamina and still be vulnerable once the attack actually starts. Your roll iframes won't keep you safe for very long. You have to learn what the actual moves are, and when to dodge, and where to roll to be safe from follow-up attacks. You have to slow down, and study what moves Margit has before deciding how to respond. If you're watching from the outside, this boss might seem slow, but the moments between attacks are filled with so much decision-making and tension that it never feels slow to the player. You're never waiting to make your next decision. The waiting is a decision. And if you choose wrong, you're dead. Start over and study up. The slowness has a purpose, to get players in the right mindset to continue in the game. Elden Ring's bosses are made to create player action inside the inaction. Okay, next up is a different type of inaction. A boss can seem slow if it feels like the fight is on rails. Boring, slow, boring rails. You see this many times in bosses that flip between an invincible and a vulnerable state. And if there's a lot of downtime in between, watch out. Shadow the Hedgehog is chock full of ones that fall into this pit. There are like half a dozen bosses, including 3 final bosses, that play out as a 5 to 10 minute ride waiting for their state to change. The fight against Black Doom is by far the worst of them. He's completely invincible most of the time. He'll drop shields only after he's done attacking, where he'll be open for a couple of homing attacks, before teleporting away, and then the cycle repeats. His attacks aren't tough to avoid. It's just tons and tons of waiting around for them to end before getting a chance to do anything productive. This game has a super meter that you fill up as you get hits in. For fights like Sonic and Diablon, or the one against Eggman's Egg Dealer, you do your homing attack chip damage and wait around until you fill up your meter and unleash the ultimate power.
No, not Shadow Fever!
What? No, a gun. Now you can do a boatload of damage in one go. It speeds up the whole process. You can't do that with Black Doom. He's only vulnerable for so long, and you can't really take advantage of your infinite ammo like before. You're gonna be stuck here for a while. With Vector.
Hey, don't go there! Yet!
And that wouldn't be so bad if the fight itself had more interesting actions for you to do. There's no secret technique, or hard pattern to dodge, or enough choice to be made. Just a few basic patterns repeated over and over until you win. 5 minutes can feel like forever, if they're boring enough. I could have picked a bunch of other fights in the game with the same problem, a tedious 3 to 5 minute slog of chipping the boss down, or one where you can blast them down to nothing once you get access to a weapon with infinite ammo. But this approach to a fight isn't hopeless. An improvement might look more like the Ratchet and Clank series bosses. It's also a weapons-focused furry mascot platformer, and those fights are handled with much better pacing. You don't rely on limited weapons or a super meter that can remove the limits during the fight. These bosses aren't flipping in and out of an invincible state. It's actually a little more vanilla of a boss fight, really. You and the boss, and you can fire with whatever you've got. Dodge and weave around a variety of attacks and hit back whenever you can. Maybe break up the fighting with some driving, but otherwise keep it open to attack. The difference is that this game doesn't bake in all the little bits of downtime into the structure of the boss fights in the same way. These bosses aren't breaking new ground, and eventually they became a little too similar across the series as it went on. But there aren't the same low lows in the boss fights in Ratchet and Clank compared to Shadow. If you can make the boss structure less restrictive, that can fix the problem. Okay, one more topic. We're going to Final Fantasy XIV for this one. Oh, and we'll dust off the old spoiler card. Uneven difficulty over time can wreck how a boss feels, and MMO raid bosses tolerate it especially poorly. This style of boss is built to be tackled as a team, lots of coordination between lots of people in a party, and the style's mechanics are built to challenge the teamwork of the group. But a unique style comes with unique problems. The 7th fight in Endwalker's Pandemonium Savage Raid series, Agdistis. Fight this tree. Just like most MMO raid bosses, Agdistis throws out tons of attacks that have different mechanical ways to counter them. You and 7 of your closest, dearest friends have to decipher the fight, like you've probably done in lots of other raids on the way here. Your group has to attack, move, and use utility skills at specific times to handle different boss mechanics and keep incoming damage and casualties to a minimum. The high-end raid combat experience in FF14 is a synchronized dance, a spinning of plates on poles, whose punishment for failure is death. One small slip-up, one accidental death here, one missed move there, can cascade quickly, where a loss of damage, defense, or utility will end in a full party wipe. Assuming you're fighting on content and aren't crazy overpowered, you have to take this boss out within a set time limit, else it does an enrage attack and wipes the party. So you all have to learn the dance, the prog, hours of practice before the real thing. And this is where a slow, poorly paced MMO raid boss can eat away at you. The Savage version of this fight is extremely backloaded. The first 4 or 5 minutes are easy to learn and kind of boring really by raid standards. If your group has made it to this raid boss, you've seen these early tricks before and shouldn't have a problem. The back end of the fight changes it up. The mechanics get way more interesting, tougher to execute, more annoying to counter. Back-to-back, unrelenting attacks. More fun, but you'll be dying a lot while you all learn. Learning an MMO raid boss isn't like learning to play a piano piece. You can't jump to the middle to practice, at least in FF14. Every time your party wipes, you have to start over from the beginning and do 5 minutes of boring build-up all over again. And since it's an MMO, there's another wrinkle here. Let's say you got your roll down. You got everything right. But did your friends? All 7 of them? It's bad enough when you have to restart because of something you did, but it feels so much worse if you have no control over what's keeping you from progressing. MMO raids demand patience above all, and a raid boss that adds any kind of time-wasting friction to that process can feel especially bad. 4 to 5 minutes spent going through the motions at the start, without your party learning anything new, just to have to do it again the second anyone in your group slips up. It's brutal. So, what could you do to fix a slow raid boss? You've got lots of options, some way easier to implement than others. If you front load the difficulty, like flipping the 2 phases to make the harder one first, that would solve a chunk of it. Might make the boss less fun though. If all parts were evenly difficult, the problem would also go away. You could also checkpoint the fight, break it up into stages, and groups can tackle each one individually without repeating so much. Lots of games do that already, like Destiny 2 for its raid bosses. FF14 does that too for other bosses, as that game uses checkpoints when a boss makes a dramatic phase change mid-fight, like in most final bosses of a raid tier. Agdistis doesn't change, at all. You could try an instant respawn mode, where you don't get the prestige or the gear associated with beating the fight without dying, but you still get to practice the rest of the raid boss. That would help people get better faster. Or, to really go all out, the devs could create a raid practice mode. Create bots that can handle each raid roll well enough to get through the fight. When a player wants to practice against a boss, have them sub for one of the bots, and let the player learn the fight through doing. Watching someone beat a raid boss on a YouTube video or from a wiki helps, but there's no better way to learn than hands-on practice. A new player could learn the basics and practice up whenever they wanted, not just when they've strong-armed friends and guild members into being a guide. Third-party tools that help you practice raids, like FF14 Raid Simulator, do exist, but maybe it's a good idea for games to implement better practice modes directly. More robust ways to practice a game leads to higher skill ceilings. This happened in rhythm games. Friendly practice modes in games like Guitar Hero and Step Mania led to more practice and more skill. Now players can knock out charts in these games that used to be superhuman. If you remove some friction from the learning process, through redesigning the boss or by making it easier to practice, players will be less likely to feel that one of these bosses is too slow. Or, if you need a good slow boss, just steal any of the ones from Shadow of the Colossus. They're perfect. Head to the comments and let's talk about how perfect Shadow of the Colossus is. Or if you've got your own favorite terrible slow boss, let us know down there. A too slow boss can mean a lot of things. Whether you need to cut the waiting time, make telegraphing more interesting, fix your cinematics, or pace it better, you can put a slow boss on the fast track to success.